Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all my Ogdoadic Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for May 2021. For those of you that don't know, this was the Abhiss deck in the OCG, name changed for the TCG, a reptile-based deck that focuses on special summoning a bunch of different reptile monsters from the graveyard in the form of the new Ogdoadic monsters, and just basically benefiting from the different boss monsters you special summon out in the field, using all of the different reptile resources you have. And just because we have so many different cards reprinted for reptiles in this set, made it a lot easier to gather all the cards needed for the deck profile, with reptiles definitely helping a lot with the special summon being able to set up so easily in the graveyard with some of their generic support. I'm definitely happy with the results. I want to go for as pure of a Ogdoadic deck profile as I could, focusing solely on the reptile support with a little bit more for the trap support based on some of the traps we do run in the deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with some of the boss monsters for the Ogdoadics. I run one Marissa, the Ogdoadic Queen. You really only need one ofs for all of the different boss monsters because you're just going to easily set them up in the graveyard, and then you can special summon them from there. If this card's in your graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters to special summon this card. And if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, except during the damage step, you can send one card they control of the graveyard. So the whole point of the Ogdoadic monsters is to benefit from you sending your opponent's resources based on cards that you can gather up on your side of the field. And these boss monsters all have different monster effects that can help make this happen. With this card, like I said, just helping to set up cards from your opponent's hand or deck as well, and special summoning one light or dark reptile monster from your graveyard except for Amnesia onto the field, and you can only use each effect of Amnesia once per turn. So we only run one. Like I said, once you get set up in the graveyard, that's really all you need for the special summon. I also run one Aaron, King of the Ogdoadic. I'm running the one, it was the one I couldn't pull sadly from the pack, but it matches with the Ogdoadic Queen as well for setup. If it's in the graveyard, attributing 2 monsters to special summon it out. And also, if your opponent adds a card from their hand except during the draw phase or damage step, you can send one random card from their hand to the graveyard, taking away from the resources, but also just having more of the special summon to add one light monster, and also for the reptile monster added from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except for this card, giving you more search for some of your other Ogdoadic monsters. With the last of some of the one-ofs, I also run one Arliette, the Ogdoadic Dark. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 1 monster to special summon this card. It's more of a one-of just because of the fact that it just needs 1 tribute. But once again, setting up all these different reptiles in your graveyard is a big plus for sure, because then you can just easily special summon them with some of your bigger number monsters we run for the Ogdoadic. So 1 Arliette for the setup, 1 Karis for the Ogdoadic Light, attributing 1 monster and special summon this card. If it's special summoned, you can target 1 level 4 or lower Ogdoadic monster in your graveyard and special summon it, giving you more resources, but you also have to banish it when it leaves the field. And lastly, one of our big boss monster, which is Ogdoabyss, deity of the Ogdoadic. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 1 monster to special summon this card, and once while face up on the field, quick effect, you can send all monsters on the field to the graveyard except face up monsters that were special summoned from the graveyard, and you can only use each effect of Ogdoabyss, deity of the Ogdoadic, once per turn. So with this card, you have the setup needed to just summon it out onto the field, clearing out a good number of cards your opponent may have on the field as long as they weren't special summoned from the graveyard. But like I said, you only really need one-ofs for all the different boss monsters just because they're that easy to set up in the graveyard, especially with one of our go-to spells in the deck, and then just being able to send them all gives you the plays you need with some of your other Ogdoadic monsters. With some of the bigger numbers residing in the lower level cards, I run 3 Nunu, the Ogdoadic Remnant. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to send 1 dark reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. If you control no monsters or you control an Ogdoadic monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, you cannot special summon monsters except reptile monsters while this face-up card is in the monster zone. You can only use each effect of Nunu, the Ogdoadic Remnant, once per turn. So with this card, it's send power for all of your different Ogdoadic monsters that you have, being able to send them to the graveyard to then set them up, and also just an easy special summon onto the field. Gives you tribute power for the special summon onto the field for all of your different ones, needing more of a tribute for your Ogdoabyss, needing 3 tributes, but very easily to special summon whether you're king or queen, only needing the 2 tributes for this card onto the field for that setup. That's why I'm running 3 Nunu, the Ogdoadic Remnant. Easy setup, and also easy special summon from the graveyard. I also run 3 Nayu, the Ogdoadic Remnant. If you don't have any of the other super rare setup, you can substitute in some of the rares. I have Eligos, the Ogdoadic Boundless, for one of the fill in spots until you get other super rare spots for this card. With this one, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to send one light reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard, with your Nunu being the counterpart, sending the dark monster. With this card, being able to send that, and also if this card's normal or special summon, you can add one Ogdoadic spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Nanya, the Ogdoadic remnant, once per turn. So more search power. Normal or special summon is a big plus for sure, even if you resolve it from the graveyard. You can get that search, and being able to have this comboed with your Ogdoadic remnant can give you more setup with this special summon, giving your 2 monsters on the field to tribute for some of your other Ogdoadic monsters. And then lastly, for the Ogdoadic monsters, I run 2 Zoha, the Ogdoadic Boundless. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summon from the graveyard, you can activate this effect. Your opponent draws 1 card. If they do, you add 1 Ogdoadic monster from your deck to your hand, except for Zoha, the Ogdoadic Boundless. Then each player sends 1 card from their hand to the graveyard. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard to add this card to your hand. You can only use each effect of Zoha once per turn, but the draw power it basically makes up for it, aside from the fact that your opponent will have a little graveyard setup, or they might be missing out on a card, just so you can search out one of your Ogdoadic monsters and then set it up in the graveyard to tribute out onto the field. I run 2 of this card. It's not really as great as the special summon power that your Nayu has, or the search power. Reverse that, Nunu for the special summon power and Nayu for the search power, but still good for just the setup it can do in the graveyard if you just open up this card. Plus a different number of monsters as well to work well with the spell power of Ogdoadic Water Lily, needing different named reptile monsters to resolve with the special summon. And then lastly, for the monsters in the main deck, I run 3 Lilith, Lady of Lament. If this card's normal summon, its original attack becomes 1000. We mostly run this card in the deck because of the fact that we do run a good number of normal traps. So being able to search out these cards for the tribute is a big help for all that search power, whether it be to set up for special summoning or just the destruction power that Offering to the Snake Deity provides. Being able to search and add those to hand is a big plus with this card. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 3 Ogdoadic Water Lily. You send 1 reptile from your deck to the graveyard. Then if you have 5 or more reptiles with different names in your graveyard, you can special summon 1 reptile from your graveyard. You can activate 1 Ogdoadic Water Lily per turn. What's great about the boss monsters is they have no restrictions for their special summon, so as long as they're in the graveyard, you can easily special summon them onto the field. And the fact that Water Lily contributes for the different reptiles in the graveyard, it doesn't just special summon, it sets up. So you need those different named monsters, and having many different boss monsters with different names, you can easily have that with our next go-to card, which is Snake Rain, also running 3 of this. You discard 1 card to send 4 reptiles from your deck to the graveyard. It's not a once per turn, so if you have 2 of this in your hand, you potentially set up all of your different Ogdoadic monsters in the graveyard. Just need a discard for it. It can be the potential additional reptile monster as well, sending 4 more to the graveyard, needing the 5 you needed without even needing to use the first effect of your Ogdoadic Water Lily to set up 1 final reptile in the graveyard. And lastly, I run 2 Ogdoadic Origin for the last of the generic spell Reptile support. With this card, if a face-up reptile monster you control is destroyed by battle or opponent's card effect, you can target 1 of your basically of your Ogdoadic monsters or card in your opponent controls, send it to the graveyard. And if this card is on the field, is destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard equal to the number of reptile monsters with different names in your graveyard. You can only use the effect of Ogdoadic Origin once per turn. So what's great about this card is it just sets up more in your graveyard. If you can potentially mill some of the different reptiles to the graveyard with this card, it's just an added bonus. But it's good for that, and also just for more of that setup to rely on. I also run 3 Super Polymerization. The biggest thing about this deck is taking your opponent's resources, and with this card you can basically take their monsters along with the different attribute monsters, with Dark being the good majority compared to the light attribute, being able to then summon out cards from your extra deck like Starving Venom Fusion Dragon and also Predaplant Trivthofertim, being able to use your opponent's resources as well with your, let's say, weaker reptiles on the field is a big plus for sure, and why I like to run 3 of it in the deck. For some of the one-ofs for the spells, I run 1 Terraforming for the search power going into our field spell, just thinning out the deck as well if we can easily search it before we do any of the milling. 1 Foolish Burial, just like the Snake Rain, just with 1 monster, but sometimes we could just be off 1. It doesn't require a discard like Snake Rain, so if we just have that 1 specific Ogdoadic monster we want set up in the graveyard, this could be the card to go for. Monster Reborn, special summoning back resources onto the field again, just like Water Lily, and 1 Call by the Grave, just stopping my opponent's resources for any of their plays they might try to resolve before I can use my own reptile monsters. And that is it for the spells. We'll now move on to the traps. For the Ogdoadic traps, I only run one Ogdoadic Hollow. During the main phase, you contribute one reptile effect monster, then target one monster in your opponent's graveyard. Special summon it to your field, but send it to the graveyard during the end phase. You can only use this effect of Ogdoadic Hollow once per turn, and if this face-up card is sent from the spell and trap card zone to the graveyard, send all face-up non-reptile monsters you control to the graveyard. So, being able to tribute a reptile monster, target a monster in our opponent's graveyard gives us a resource to use against them, but also just there for the resource taking. And you will lose all your reptile monsters, non-reptile monsters, when you use this card and it's sent to the graveyard. But it's a risk you can take. Just being able to take one of our opponent's resources can definitely benefit depending on what we may want to go to in the extra deck. For the normal traps that I spoke of before to work with Lilith, I run 3 Offering to the Snake Deity, probably the best trap in the deck. You target one face-up reptile you control, and 2 cards your opponent control. Destroy all 3 targets. So you can set up your reptiles back in your graveyard to use, but the 2 destruction of 2 your opponent's cards is a big plus on this, just because it's an even take with this card and one of your reptiles for 2 of their cards, and you can easily disrupt some of their plays depending on what you destroy. I also run 3 back to the front. Once again, easy special summoning since there's no restriction for a good number of the Ogdoadic monsters. Summoning them back onto the field, especially with some of our level 4s, can give us more and more resources to use against our opponent. And I also run 2 Paleozoic Dinomyscus. It's just my trap of choice. If you want to try cards like Full Force Virus, that could be another spot to put in instead of this card. And it's just another trap, so you have the 3 different traps to search with your Lilith in the deck for that search power. But once again, working with the Dark Attribute monsters, Full Force Virus can be another option. I just like the banish power that Dinomyscus has and the setup in the graveyard by discarding for its effects. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 1 King of Feral Imps. It's just search power for any of the reptiles in the deck, being able to add 1 reptile with no level restriction from our deck to the hand. So I even considered 2 of this card. If you wanted to add a second card, you can just take one of the numbers from our Xyz monsters in the deck, with the other ones being 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 Castel, 1 Baguska, 1 number 107, Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon, 1 number 68, and 1 Dingirsu for some of the rank 8 plays when you can go into them with our boss monsters. Sometimes just being able to overlay with them and then detach them back into the graveyard to special summon them back is a big plus for sure. And also I run 2 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon and 1 Predaplant Trifo Veritum for the super polymerization targets, along with 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp for the different attributes. They need 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. So with your light attributes, you can rely on the other monsters for the dark attribute monsters you control, but the 1 Mud Dragon, if your opponent has any light attribute, is great for that summon. And then for the Link monsters, I run 1 Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame, needing 2 reptile monsters to summon it, and then also being able to discard 1 card. It's more for the generic setup, and also just the A counters on it are good for more just discarding to set up more of your reptiles in the graveyard, with also 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Nightmare Cerberus, and 1 Nightmare Unicorn being the rest of the count for the Link monsters in the deck. And as for the go-to plays, like I said, setup is a big part of the deck. So if you open up Snake Rain, depending on what you discard to the graveyard, you should at least be able to hopefully open up 1 of the Ogdoadic monsters. So when you discard, you then have the option to send all of the other Ogdoadic monsters we spoke of before with just 1 card, setting up 5 cards in your graveyard all together, and then giving you the option with your Water Lily to activate this card. You can send 1 additional Abyss monster, and I say that, and it's Ogdoadic. I went the whole video and didn't mess it up, but sadly, right at the end is when I messed up, sending the last Ogdoadic monster to the graveyard, and then being able to target any of the ones we sent, thanks to the easy mill power of Snake Rain, special summoning 1 back onto the field, and then benefiting from the different monster effects, and sending all the different boss monsters gives us the choice of what we may want to use against our opponent with this special summon power. And then with just more trap setup, you can summon more during your opponent's turn, depending on which one you set. You can get special summon, search power, you name it, all available with this control style deck. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. It's definitely an interesting deck. Like I said, we don't get reptile support too often, so to be able to try my hand at this deck especially, we'll definitely see it mixed around with a bunch of other cards, I'm sure, in the future, so definitely look out for it. But until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.